Well, welcome everyone to the Beverly Hills Bar Association's third annual Meet the Mental Health Professionals Night. I'm Jennifer Skolnick, co-chair of the Family Law section. Thank you for taking the time to join us during this painful period of confusion, chaos, and conflict. Hopefully, these sad and infuriating events that we find ourselves experiencing will inspire us as lawyers to do more to create a more fair, just, and peaceful society, and to do what is needed to make equality under the law an enduring reality for all. I want to thank my program co-chairs, Ellen Stein and Deborah Frank, for all the work they've done to prepare for this event. They've reached out to scores of mental health professionals to get their participation and information. They've organized our written materials, and they've got our panelists together. This program would not have happened without their hard work. I also want to thank our program sponsor, White, Zuckerman, Varsovsky, Luna, and Hunt, when you need more than an accountant. Thank you, White Zuckerman, for your help on putting together this program and the other programs for the Family Law section. I'm going to turn it over now to Ellen Stein to introduce our panelists.
Thank you, Jennifer. It's my pleasure to be introducing this panel and to be participating in this program again. I also want to thank our partners at the Beverly Hills Bar Association for all the technical assistance they gave us in a little more complicated program. We have a lot of ground to cover. We have our panelists who are going to do the presentation first. And after that, we're going to hear from each of our mental health professionals. Mental health professionals, after the panel, you'll get instructions so you'll know exactly what to expect before you speak. So get that out of your mind while you're listening to our panelists. It's my pleasure to introduce Judge Dianna Gould-Saltman, who has been sitting in family law since 2010. Prior to that, she practiced family law for 25 years. She's a judicial fellow of the American Academy of Matrimonial Law, the International Academy of Family Law, and she's a recent past president of the Association of Family and Conciliation Courts. That's just the start of her participation in our community, but I know you'd rather hear from our panelists than hear me talk about them. I'm also delighted to introduce Alexandra Leichter, who has a family law practice in Beverly Hills and has been practicing privately for 47 years. She's a fellow of the American Academy of Matrimonial Lawyers, a fellow of the International Academy of Family Lawyers, and an AAML certified family law arbitrator. She also sits on the board of directors of Levitt & Quinn. Dr. Susan Rempel is a child custody evaluator, parenting plan coordinator, mediator, and family therapist. Her practice is located in Beverly Hills. She's a licensed family therapist in the state of California, a frequent participant in programs, and frequently works with family law professionals in connection with their cases. So we're going to start with Alexandra Leichter.
Thank you, and thank you, everyone, for putting this together. You've done an amazing job, and I appreciate you asking me to talk about this, and I don't know why you asked me to talk about it. But I found that most family law attorneys have absolutely no idea as to the role of the mental health professionals. They think a mental health professional is a 7:30 evaluator. Maybe they heard about 733 and that's about it. So I'm going to tell you what I think, and my experience has been in all the years that I've been practicing, and I'm telling you what I look like is close to Methuselah. So I've got a few years on, I think, most of you. I think that most of the time, family law attorneys would be served well, and their clients would be as well, if they retained a therapist or asked the client whether they have a therapist, because the mental health professional, the therapist for the client themselves, helps them get through the divorce process and also helps them see what it's like as far as their children are concerned. They're not the ones that are going to be seeing the children. They're the ones that are seeing your clients. So I find those to be extremely helpful. There are other roles, for example, for mental health professionals, such as in, oh goodness gracious, I know I had it, as I said. In addition to, well, let me get to that. In addition to having a therapist for your own client, I think it's important for you to find out whether your client has some kind of mental health problems, whether there are some things that is wrong with your client that your client admits to, but you have to find out whether what it is that they admit to as having as a mental health problem is something that it'll affect, what will affect custody. So the mental health professionals that I normally get involved with, and you should too, at least be aware of them and ask the specific therapist what it is, or a mental health professional, what it is that they have their specialty in. So for example, you have cases that may have refuse resist. Children refuse to see the other parent, or what we used to call parental alienation syndrome, and such a syndrome doesn't exist, but parental alienation does. Mental health issues of the parents, such as mental health disorders, bipolar, borderline, narcissistic, antisocial, and so on. Mental health issues of the children that need specialists to advise you and necessarily to advise the court, so that you have a two-pronged system. One is a system where you're going to need someone to help you to determine what the issues are, what your client's problems may be, or what your client's children may have, that you are definitely not qualified to determine. I don't care how great an attorney you are, it is the mental health therapist that will help you in this process to determine what it is that you may need. So for example, you have children who have ADHD problem, bipolar, they're suicidal, autism spectrum disorder. There are all kinds of issues that the children will face, and you can probably find out in the first session that you meet with the client, if you have a custody situation, what it is that their children have. Don't be shy about probing whether their children have mental health problems, whether their children have their own mental health professionals that are treating the children. And of course, what we all know is that without the help of these mental health professionals to advise the court as to what the problems of the children are, don't expect a judge who normally is, with the exception of Judge Gould-Saltman, who has a lot of experience with family law therapy and therapists, as she was the head of AFCC, and she knows all of the experts. But most judges do not know anything, or they know very little, or they think they know something about mental health problems of the children, or mental health problems of the parents. And I think you need to get therapists to advise you, to consult with you, and perhaps to file declarations or to testify on behalf of your clients or on behalf of the children with respect to issues. You realize that in the initial RFO, for example, you're not going to have an evaluation. There's not going to be a 730, 733 or anything. You're going to have to advise the court why it is you need a 730 evaluator, for example. You have to advise the court that there are some basic problems, whether it's with the other side, whether your client, whether the children, and so on. It's the mental health professionals that are driving this case. Don't be shy about getting those people into the case. Now, let's suppose we all know and we've all heard about 730 evaluators, and there are going to be psychiatrists who cannot do any testing. There are psychologists who can do testing, MSWs and MFTs who cannot do testing, and you have PPA1s and PPA2s, which Susan Rempel will talk about. But those are the ones that are generally going to be giving the court and or you or your clients feedback about what the status of the children are, what the status of the parenting is all about, and give feedback as to what should be the solution. That's the whole goal of a 730, to advise the court, to advise you what can be done with this system, what can be done with this family. And so that your choice of whether you want to, what type of mental health professional you want, will be up to you and up to the other side. And then finally, if there's a conflict, it'll be up to the judge. But don't forget to go through very carefully with the therapist that you're choosing or that you're advocating for to make sure that that is the right person. Now, let's suppose, for example, you were lucky to get an evaluation order, which, by the way, doesn't take overnight. It'll take 6 months, sometimes 9 months, by which time the kids will be twice as old as they were before, and so on. But what do you do just because you have a mental health professional? Does a 730 evaluator, you just leave it up to them and say, let them go to it? No. You need to have a mental health professional that will help your client through this process. Just remember, they are scared out of their wits. They don't know what to expect. And if you think you're going to be able to advise them as to what happens in a 730 evaluation, I can tell you that after 47 and a half years of practice, I still can't do it all. And I've gone through hundreds and hundreds of them. That's why you need a consultant who will help your client face the evaluation and to put their best foot forward. And not only put their best foot forward, to have them understand that this isn't something they're going into the mental health professional's office and that professional is going to shoot them on the spot. They have to be able to articulate. And a lot of your clients can't articulate it, but this consultant will help you help the client articulate what the needs of the children are, what the needs of the parents are, what the problems are, and why it is that they're seeking custody or visitation, whatever, or move-aways or whatever they may be. Now, one other role that I think is very important that most people don't think about as far as attorneys are concerned is mental health professional consultants for the attorneys. Because your client may go in there and get help. But how about you? You don't know what you're talking about, especially if you're only at the beginning stage of your career. So you need a mental health, you need a consultant who will help you and articulate for you what kinds of things you should be looking for. When you're doing a deposition, for example, of the other side, or you're lucky enough to be able to depose some mental health expert on the other side, who do you think you're going to rely on? When you do an evaluation, when you have a 730 evaluation report and somebody does the report and does an MMPI or an MCMI or who knows what kind of other tests, do you know how to cross-examine them on that? No. You're going to have a consultant, a mental health professional consultant who will tell you how to examine, how to cross-examine, whether it's in deposition, whether it's in analyzing the 730 evaluation, or whether you're in court. That doesn't mean it's going to be the same person, and it almost should never be the same mental health professional that you're going to choose for a 733 evaluation. The 733 evaluator will be someone who will have the expertise, and hopefully the court will allow them to have the same access to both parties, to the children, to the records, to the testing, and so on, that you were able to get directly to the 730 evaluation. You'd be surprised how important that 733 is in light of what your client may tell you as something different from what the 730 evaluator had done. Now, one other thing I want to make sure that you understand, there are collaborative law cases. And for those of you who do collaborative law, I think it's extremely important to have the mental health professional. You probably would choose one for both sides. Sometimes you use one for each side so that they can help you advocate for what is best for your client and for your children. Finally, you use mental health professionals to resolve your custody cases. Even if you have had a knockdown, drag out type of a case, the custody, a mental health professional can help you serve as the mediator. They can also be involved as the continuing therapist or new therapists for the children, and you may advocate for new therapists with the judicial officer to whom you have presented a case and indicated that the existing mental health professional for the children was not doing an appropriate job. Don't be worried, by the way, in getting one mental health professional out. It's your job to do this work. It's your job to advocate. But I also believe, and I'm one of there are two thoughts about this. There are some attorneys who feel, custody attorneys who feel they will advocate for their client, whether it's a right position or not for the children. And the other side, of which I am an advocate, which is if I think that the client's position is not appropriate for the child, I will say so. And if they insist, I will drop the case. But you can have a mental health professional who will help you make that kind of a decision. Finally, the mental health professionals can also serve as PPCs, that's parenting plan coordinators. And the choice of that would be up to you and to the other side, whether that parenting plan coordinator is a mental health professional or as an attorney. And the two thoughts about that is my position is that attorneys are biased in favor of experience versus hope, whereas the mental health professionals are biased in favor of hope over experience. And I think I'm done.
All right. Well, I don't know how I follow that, but
You will do it very well.
all right. Well, first, let me say that I am speaking on behalf of myself. I do not speak on behalf of the Los Angeles Superior Court or the courts of the state of California. So that is your caveat. Other judges may have different opinions than I, and certainly, they're entitled to that. I also think that we should probably address the elephant in the room, which is that there's a pandemic going on. And I think that much of what we do and much of what we have done in courts or outside of courts, or if we're using some other type of appropriate dispute resolution, may be all changed because of what everybody's been going through for the last several months. So I don't think it changes the law, but I think it may change or affect the implementation of the law. And we'll find out when we get back into courtrooms. Now, with that, I can tell you that my read of the law is that absent an agreement of the parties, family court really only has two ways to invite people to use mental health professionals without their consent. One would be in the context, and this is other than with regard to an evaluation. One would be under 3190. I read 3190 as requiring that there has to have been a dispute that impacts the well-being of the children in order for me to order that without an agreement of the parties. And the intention of that therapy is to improve the communication between one or more participants in the family. So that I have. The other is if I have a domestic violence case, I have the ability to order batterer's intervention program as a condition of my orders in that type of case. Without those two, certainly if parties have a stipulation with regard to therapy, either their own therapy, co-parenting therapy, conjoint therapy, therapy for their children, and they want to include that in an order, it may be a quid pro quo, I'll do this if you'll agree to therapy, and they do. I certainly have the right to sign that, and then once I have signed it, it is an enforceable order. The question then becomes, whether I can order any type of individual therapy for any participant in my courtroom other than under 3190 or in the domestic violence context batterers intervention program. And there's actually a couple of thoughts on that. I don't have the right to do it. Does that mean I can do it? Does that mean that other judges do it? Absolutely. And here's how that happens. I think it's not inappropriate to invite people to come back to me if the situation as I find it when they are before me is such that it is not in the best interest of the children to have the parenting plan that they're asking for, but to essentially give them a roadmap of the types of things that if this were different, I might make a different order in the future. So I'm not going to order somebody to do individual therapy, but I may certainly let them know that there seemed to be substantial evidence of this, that, or the other happening, which they have the power to address through therapy, and I don't have the ability to order them to do that. Now, they may raise their hand and say, order me, I'm happy to do it. I want a different custody order than you're giving me. In which case, that may be something I would do, and I might then invite them if the situation changes after they've had some therapy to come back and explain to me how it would be different now. Or they may, huff and puff and leave, but eventually decide, okay, well, the court's giving me a roadmap of the things I might need to address if I don't like the result I just got. So maybe therapy would be a way for me to do that. The other thought on that is more a philosophic one. Is it a judge's job to essentially coerce parties to do things that the court doesn't have the power to order them to do because the court perceives that it would be in the best interest of the children if they did that? Some judges do, and they may do it right off the bat. Some judges don't. I think that if there's going to be therapy, few family court judges, as Alexandra indicated, know the difference of different types of therapies. They may perceive what the problem is based on the evidence that's been presented, but they don't know who does something about that. What they want is, you go to a therapist and get fixed. I don't like the way you're behaving. I'm making this custody order because of your behavior. Go change that. But they don't know who to send them to, why to send them, or what kind of work needs to be done to make that happen. That said, I would say that it's really important for attorneys to inform the court of what's available out there. What types of therapy would address whatever the problem is that the court's found in its order to be the issue for these parents or one of these parents, or for the child for that matter. I think that that's different than the type of assumptions that can be made when parents voluntarily go to therapy on their own. So whether the court's ordering them to therapy, or whether the court's implying that it would be good for them to go to therapy, or even if their own attorneys are telling them they really should go to therapy to address some issue, I think that mental health professionals who work with court-involved families need to inform themselves not just of the law, not just of what the statute says about 3190, but to understand that in the garden variety therapeutic setting with an adult, if you're a therapist and an adult walks in and says, my life is just going to hell in a handbasket and I really need some help addressing that, they can assume that this person's here voluntarily, this person wants to do some work and is willing to do some work in order to change their situation and make it better, either for themselves or for their children. And we start from that presumption. If that person's being ordered to therapy, not having done that, then we don't have that assumption. And I think therapists need to know that if you're coming in there kicking and screaming because a judge ordered you, or you're coming in there kicking and screaming because a judge implied that absent you're doing so, you're not getting any more custody time than whatever you got, you can't assume the things that you assume in the garden variety case. So it's important for therapists to know that. In addition to that, the court certainly has the ability to use mental health professionals under 730 as the court's own expert. One thing the court can do, which I don't see a lot of courts doing, but which is available to the court, is to have a mental health professional as a didactic expert. So, for example, if somebody comes to me and in their papers are telling me that a child has a particular mental health issue, but nobody has brought me anything, or the child's not in any sort of therapy, and the parents are in dispute about that issue, I can appoint somebody under 730, not to evaluate this family, but for the purpose of explaining to me, what is this syndrome that's being talked about? What would I be needing to know about it, so that I can assess some things about it that I might need to know in order to make an appropriate order for the child. The other thing that the court offers and some private practitioners offer are child interviews. I generally am not going to be somebody who will order a child interview. Child interview within the court process is one where a mental health professional with family court services within the court will interview the child, usually on some specific and discrete issue, privately at the courthouse, and then that mental health expert testifies, not with any kind of an evaluative process, but simply tells the court what the child said. Theoretically, it's for the purpose of reducing the anxiety of the child testifying in a court. The benefit of that is that may in fact reduce the anxiety. It also has the benefit of having somebody who has the experience a mental health professional has of working with children and speaking with children and knowing how to ask questions in a non-invasive way, but also knowing the follow-up appropriate questions to ask to get to the heart of the matter. The downside, of course, is they get in the courtroom, and if anybody asks them a cross-examination question, what can they say? I didn't ask the child that, or that would have been a good question to have asked, but that was this morning. I can't start over. So for that reason, I'm less inclined to do that. I think that's about all I have to tell you about judges and mental health professionals.
Okay, well then I'll take it away from there. I'm going to cover 3 questions. What is an example of a helpful and a not so helpful use of mental health professionals in a family law matter? What are some of the ethical issues that mental health professionals must be aware of while working with people who are involved with family law matters? And how are child custody evaluations conducted? So let's start off with my number 1 unhelpful use of a mental health professional. And that would be retaining someone who has little or no training and experience with respect to family law. And I can give you a great example of why I think this is unhelpful. I was the evaluator in a case where parent number 1 had sole legal custody, but the real issue was between the child and parent number 2. So parent number 1, not wanting to be very helpful about fixing the problems that existed, took the child to a therapist who had no experience in family law and told the therapist that parent number 2 could not be involved. So then they did therapy, and the therapist wrote me a letter about all the wonderful things that had happened with parent number 1. And I called her and asked her, why didn't you involve parent number 2? Well, I didn't think that was important. I was doing work with the system that was before me. Well, that's not helpful for the court. So make sure that you're using people who understand what happens in a family law case, the issues surrounding parents not being in the same home. All of those things are very important. Now, helpful, echoing what Alexandra had to say, a helpful use, I think, and underutilized in most cases, are consultants. Use mental health professionals as a consultant, not only for the reasons that were stated before, but I think that I can be very helpful in taking the emotional load off the attorney. When you get the long email that's filled with all sorts of emotion, I have attorneys who will just forward it and say, you need to talk to Susan about this. That can make your day much better as well as the client's. I think that consultants can help do some reality testing with clients about what might and might not be commonly ordered with a particular developmental stage. I think that consultants can do a lot to do some parent education. I think that if you're in the middle of a litigated matter, it is a really great opportunity for change. You can get parents who weren't so involved, you can get them involved, you can teach them great caretaking patterns, you can do all sorts of things because the parent is actually motivated to change at that moment. And whether or not you hire the mental health professional as a consultant or as something else like a parent educator, for example, it really depends if you want people to know. If you've got a parent who's been having some negative caretaking practices, you probably want to go in before the judge and say, look, proactively, my client is already engaging in parent education, but maybe you don't want that. So you have to think of how you want to use the person in the case. Let's talk about some ethical issues that are faced by mental health professionals who are involved with family law matters. Now, of course, some are the same as any other niche or just general work, no dual relationships, for example. But again, you need to use someone who's experienced in family law matters because they will know that you have to disclose about potential conflicts, particularly in light of having worked with an attorney before. If you've had 20 cases with attorney number one and attorney number two wants to hire you and doesn't know that, that's a huge problem because of all the implications for bias, et cetera. Assuming more than one role in the same case. I cannot, as an evaluator, turn around in the midst of a crisis within the family and start doing therapy. That's completely inappropriate. Can I give them referrals for a therapist? Sure, but I can't change my hat in the middle of the game. And one of my favorite examples is making recommendations. And that's because, again, if you don't have any experience in family law, you don't know what the word recommendation really means in the context of the court system. So if I'm an evaluator, I can make recommendations. If I'm a therapist, I can make suggestions. I can have opinions, but without the ability to collect collateral information, I often tell people now these days, I say, I'm just the lady in the box. How do I know? I just know what you're telling me. At last, if you're working within family law matters, not only do you have to be aware of what's required, such as evaluators need to follow California Rules of Court 5.220, and not only do you have to have a good working knowledge of the relevant literature in the area, but I think that you also need, as a mental health professional, to have an understanding of case law as well. Now, do I have to know it as well as the attorneys? No. But how could I be helpful for the courts, for example, in a relocation case, if I don't know about the Lagrange factors? So I personally make it a point every year I go to a recent developments program and I try to do other legal continuing education on an ongoing basis so that I can be fully informed of what I need to know. And then to do with what takes place during a child custody evaluation. Well, the answer is it depends, because there are variations between how family court services staff and private practitioners conduct them. With respect to, and there's a difference between conducting a limited scope evaluation and a comprehensive evaluation. So you've heard the term PPA today. What is a PPA? Well, it's a parenting plan assessment. Family Court Services offers two types of PPAs. One is a PPA 1 and the other one is a PPA 2. For both, the staff members have access to a parent questionnaire and a case file and other relevant information ahead of the interview. Hopefully they'll be doing a little bit of collateral collection, but I think that depends by the evaluator, really. For a PPA 1, you'll typically have 3 to 4 hours of interviewing. And that's interviewing parents, interviewing children, observing parents and children together, hopefully attempting to make some significant collateral contacts if there's time. Then recommendations are provided to counsel. If there's recommendations of what's going to be recommended if the evaluator testifies. If there's no settlement, then testimony generally happens on the same day in most cases. For a PPA2, you'll have a full day of interviewing and collateral collection, and possibly more the next morning. Everyone shows up, I believe it's 11:30, to hear what the recommendations are. And if there's no settlement, 11:30 might not be accurate, but in the afternoon, if there's no settlement, then testimony follows that. Now, a private limited scope evaluation can be tailored to fit the question that's before the court. Generally, the interviews are more limited, but the observation, more limited than a comprehensive evaluation, but the observation time is similar to that of a regular evaluation. And the number of collaterals really are dependent upon the question. I can tell you how tailored they can be. I volunteered to do a pro bono PPA2, and I realized after getting the case that it was really an all or nothing call, because one parent wanted to move out of state and they had very limited funds. So I was able, me, myself, and I, to decide and go ahead and do basically a comprehensive evaluation, because I thought that would be more helpful for the court. What's a comprehensive evaluation? Well, it's more in depth. There are multiple interviews with each parent, going deeper into history, deeper into issues before the court. I personally see every evaluator probably does a little bit different in their style and their scope and what the questions they ask. I personally see each child twice with each parent. I do multiple child interviews. I collect collateral information. Some people do psych testing with every evaluation. I do it on a case-by-case. Report is prepared and distributed, and testimony may or may not occur at deposition or trial. And I want to throw one other thing in. There's an interesting question now, given the pandemic. Can you do a custody evaluation via Zoom? I feel very confident after I've worked with clients on Zoom for about a year. I feel very comfortable using it. And I think it really is dependent upon how comfortable you are with the technology. But if you're going to do that, I think you need to think through some of the challenges, such as how do you know that the parent is in the room when you're interviewing the child? Well, for therapy cases, I have the kids go into their rooms, do a little 360 dance for me, and have them sit with their back toward the door so I can see whether or not somebody's coming in. Now, I'm starting to do work on evaluations that I had been working on earlier this year. And am I going to say that it could be a limitation because I'm going to do it virtually? Absolutely, because we don't really know at this point. But do I think that it still provides a valuable piece of information for courts? Absolutely, to that as well. And I think that's all I have to say.
Well, could we then turn to Judge Gould-Saltman? How will you feel about receiving a custody evaluation that's been done virtually?
I don't think I have any problem with that. If a protocol's been set out, as Susan has described, so that I feel comfortable that there is a fair and as complete as possible process, and the evaluator has explained to me the limitations, and we don't know what those are, but they've been pointed out, look, I don't know what I don't know, then I can take that into consideration. If somebody shows me, here's my house in Nebraska, you can't get there, but, I want you to see where I'm moving, and it's the Taj Mahal, I would know that's the Taj Mahal. But, am I going to know that it's a mansion or not a mansion? I wouldn't know. But the other side has some impetus to tell me. Other than that, I don't think there isn't necessarily any difference in the interactive portion. I mean, there are limitations and glitches and things like that. But frankly, I was thinking about this in the context of doing hearings in court. If I have everybody on Zoom in front of me, I actually am face-to-face and maybe even closer face-to-face than a witness who's 3 feet away from me, but only in my peripheral vision. I can as long as they're not wearing a mask, I can get context clues, facially that I wouldn't otherwise have gotten. And I have to imagine somebody who's trained to interact with people as a psychologist is even in a better position than I am.
Ella?
Yes, Alexandra.
Yeah, I want to add something to that. Keep in mind that when the evaluator does a complete evaluation, they don't get to see each and every collateral. Very often they may have some videos, they may have depositions, and they may have interviews on the telephone. I have rarely seen situations where you have an evaluator bring in every single collateral. So you already have a two-step process to begin with. It's not that far-fetched to have a Zoom evaluation done, as Susan has indicated.
I guess what I'm wondering is how the interaction between a parent and child might be impacted if they have to stay in front of a camera and in a certain place for a period of time for you to observe. And that may be one of those we don't know till we do it.
Well, actually, I think it can actually be an improvement, because when you're doing an evaluation, you're sitting in a room with two people and say, play a game or do some homework or something, and then you're sitting there staring at them and you're 4 feet away, 6 feet away, but you're watching them. And children are naturally, you expect for things to not be as organic as they would be if you weren't there. Well, think of the possibility of taking a phone and putting it over on the counter and me saying, okay, let's do some homework. Well, it's just the phone sitting there. So I think actually it could be even more comfortable. Of course, it's going to depend on each and every child. Each and every child is going to react differently. But I think in terms of therapy, I think I'm doing better work with kids because they don't have to drive to my office. They're not stuck there for a specific amount of time. And I'm interacting with them on their device that they love. So I think there's a lot of potential for some upside. Well, they do love their devices, heck.
Absolutely. So we lawyers have very strong duties of confidentiality, and this is one area where mental health professionals and our ethical responsibilities can diverge when because a mental health professional is a designated reporter. Could you speak to that and what the obligation is? Yes, I'm sorry, Dr. Rempel.
Well, they're very different roles. Tell me if I'm wrong about this, Alexandra, but if you have a child in your office, and if you're minors counsel, and the child says to you that they've basically been abused, but don't tell anybody, you're in a real double bind. But
There is a difference between the role of an attorney and the role of a therapist. A mental health professional is obligated by law to be a reporter. An attorney has an obligation to keep the secrets of their client, and they either can, there's now a divergence of opinion, but I feel, as much as it hurts me, pains me to say this, I feel that the obligation of the attorney is not to report. Now, what they may do is they may then send the patient, the client, to a mental health professional who would then have to report it. But as far as the attorney is concerned, I don't think they can. I'll defer to Judge Gould-Saltman on this issue.
I think you're correct. Under California law, there are other states in which that is not the case. But I would also say I'm actually fine with it, and for this reason. I think if you've got a child who's old enough to be in therapy, or a child who's old enough to be participating in litigation, has an attorney, one of the things you do right off the bat, and you tell me whether you don't, is you explain that role to that child in developmentally appropriate terms so that they understand what you can do, what you can't do, what you explain to them when you're allowed to keep secrets or not disclose information, and when you no longer have a choice to do that. And as an attorney, and I represented children for 16 years of my practice, I did the same thing. Here are the things that I can do. Here are the things that I can't do. I'm here to represent your best interest. I can let the judge know certain things, but the judge may also need to know things that you're not happy about the judge knowing. But I explain that to them. And I think if the child knowing that makes a disclosure, then the child wanted to make a disclosure and, wants you to know and knows the result of disclosing.
Mm-hmm. And as a mental health professional, it doesn't matter which hat I have on. I have to specifically tell a child in a developmentally appropriate way that, as well as telling their parents, of course, that I am a mandated reporter, and a case that I ran by the hotline a few days ago. Did they take the case? No. But even if I think that it's a possibility of being abusive, I have the duty to check that out and to report it if necessary.
Thank you. Dr. Rempel, I'd like you to return, if you would, for a moment to dual roles and the different hats that mental health professionals wear, because I've found that that's an area that we as attorneys aren't always clear about, and sometimes mental health professionals aren't clear about that. So if you are, for example, a therapist for the family, can you also be seeing mom and dad? How many of you mental health professionals do we need, and when do we have to draw the lines?
Well, my training is with family systems theory, so I want to work with everybody. If you send a 9-year-old or a 7-year-old to me for therapy, it's probably not the 9 and 7-year-old who really need the therapy. It's the parents. Most of my high conflict cases, I end up working more with the parents than with the children, because if the parents would knock it off, the child would probably go back to being a happy child. So, but you have to be careful. You can't switch from being an evaluator to a therapist, or from being you can't start as a therapist and assume some sort of forensic role. You have to be real careful about what your role is and how it's defined. And it's really incumbent upon the mental health folks to have a contract that clearly explains what it is that they're going to be doing.
And let me just pipe up and say, if you're an attorney, please don't ask a judge to make a mental health professional violate their ethics. I've had people, we would like you to appoint Dr. Rempel to be mom's therapist and the children's therapist and the family therapist, but then if there's a conflict, we'd like her to do some co-parenting, and then if not, then we'd like you to address some things with the stepsister. And it's like, no. And I also, I'm not a trained therapist, but I have a degree in psychology, and I also trained in systems. And I think it works well in one direction and far less well in the other. So if you have somebody who's serving as an individual therapist, let's say the child's therapist, it is certainly common and appropriate for the child's therapist to have some sessions with each parent to orient himself or herself to what the world is like at mom's house and what the world is like at dad's house. And if there are things that would be supportive of the child in each house, to inform the parents of that. That doesn't make this person the family therapist. So I think it sounds like we're slicing things very, very thin. But I think, again, inform. The more you have up front, the less you have on the back end of problems when people misinterpret it.
If I may.
You may.
Okay. I just want to add something that I don't think was made clear. I talked about the consultant who is going to be involved in an evaluation or help with the client with the evaluation and so on. I think it's very important for attorneys to understand that, number one, that consultant should remain confidential because there's a work product privilege. But the minute you have that consultant be revealed because they are talking to the evaluator, or they disclose themselves in one way or another, you lost that work product privilege. If you want to have them appointed as a 733, it is great for the other side, because the other side then is going to be able to take depositions upon depositions and find out everything that your client has said. So be very careful that you don't disclose that. One other thing, a couple of other things I want to mention is that we were talking about PP1 and PP2, and one of the things that I'm very wary about, because I also act as a judge pro tem in family court, and I hear some of these cases. I've had cases where the PP1 comes into court and wants to testify, and I said, is there a Sanchez waiver? And everybody looks at me like, a what? And so you have to be cognizant of that. When you do ask for a 733 evaluation, make sure that you've gotten an ANCA waiver. I'm not going to just, go through what that is. Look it up if you need to, and I think it's in the materials that I had written. But I think these are key words that you should be aware of, key cases you should be aware of before you embark on any kind of an evaluation or you take these custody cases.
Thank you. I do also want to address the unusual times we're in. And Dr. Rempel, I'm wondering, are mental health professionals able to help us distinguish whether a parent's response to the pandemic or to the civil unrest is normal or usual or pathological? And does it matter?
Well, it certainly matters if they're having an inappropriate response. It certainly matters in terms of being a parent. I think what I'm seeing in my own practice is that if we're all anxious, how could you not be anxious after the past week? We're all, with all the uncertainty that's going around, and on top of that, the pandemic. But what I'm seeing in my own practice is if there's a character disorder, it just went on steroids, and it's true. And everyone's off. If there's conflict between parents, they are off to the races. So I think we can be very helpful in helping attorneys figure out what should they be telling their clients. What should they be telling them to do and not do, and should they be giving them a dose of now is the time for self-care. Now is the time to focus on yourself and improving yourself and exercising and all the other things, rather than letting the parents spiral off into oblivion.
So Judge Gould-Saltman, we're going to get custody evaluations, and you're going to have parties in front of you who are reacting to the current circumstances. And how are you going to handle this sort of uncertainty, perhaps, as to whether this is a temporary behavior or an ongoing behavior?
Well, the custody evaluation cases are probably the least problematic, because while I would be wary of any over pathologizing of behavior, because I believe there's a wide range of appropriate responses to new and crisis situations. Some people freeze, some people go right into take care of business mode, I can panic later. People do all of those things, and I will probably want to see what their natural response is in terms of how it affected the child and how they focused on the child. But I think the more concerning cases for me are going to be the multitude of cases in which there is no evaluation. What I have are behaviors that are being described to me by witnesses, based and observed through the prism of their own experience of going through a pandemic. So I guess we'll see. It'll be experimental. No judge that I know has ever been through a pandemic. And we're all going to be assessing everybody else's response to pandemics through the prism of our experience in a pandemic. People whose experiences are very different from ours, which is why it's probably helpful for us to talk to mental health professionals about, how to, just in the same way that we get training on implicit bias, that bias that's way back here that you didn't know you had. How do I know that I'm not responding to somebody else's behavior because, but for the grace of God, that's how I might have responded, but I got lucky and things worked out for me. So I think we're going to have to sort of be hyper aware of our own assumptions and step back regularly as we hear these types of cases to create multiple hypotheses for why some of the behaviors that are described for us could have occurred. Everything from this person's a terrible person or a terrible parent to, oh my God, they're a hero, but for them having done those things, much worse would have happened to this child, and everything in between.
Mhm.
Any thoughts on that, Alexandra? How are you going to be handling that?
I agree with Judge Gould-Saltman 100%. I think we're living in a time that is going to go away. It may well go away by the beginning of next year. But this is a temporary situation. As she says, none of us have lived through this. Some of us have lived through wars. Some of us have lived through suicides. Some of us have lived through other things, but not a world pandemic. And you can't possibly predict, nor can you condemn most people's reactions to this, because most people react in a totally different way. So you can't just say, I'll tell you how you should have reacted. There is no such thing. Nobody has rules. We don't have guidebooks to say this is how you react. You have parents who may protect their children from the COVID-19 by saying, no, you cannot go over to the other parent's house because they have a girlfriend or a boyfriend who comes back and forth because they have a child who travels back and forth. Are you going to condemn this person, take away custody because they won't allow that kid to go? You don't know. And so this is all a temporary situation. Hopefully it'll be over sooner rather than later. And I think that my prediction is that every single judge who thinks about it very carefully may make some temporary orders that will result in some kind of peace for the children. But it's not going to be, I'm going to take children away from you because you didn't allow the child to go visit every single other or every other week and stuff. You were afraid. So I think that makes, that is what is going to happen.
Well, I want to thank all of our panelists for a really thought-provoking conversation. And I'm going to turn this program over to my co-chair, and she's going to introduce the mental health professionals. Thank you again.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you. I'm Deborah Frank, and I'm introducing the mental health professionals. And I want to thank Judge Gould-Saltman, Dr. Susan Rempel, and Alexandra Lecter for an excellent presentation. As a bonus, Alex's in-depth, informative article, Practical Tips on Preparing and Trying Child Custody Cases, is included in the program materials, and it's fabulous. Now it's time to meet our mental health professionals. This is the third year we've held a Meet the Mental Health Professionals Night. Although, as we've indicated, tonight's format and the times are clearly very different from what anyone could have imagined just a few months ago. I think that family law attorneys have always recognized the need for mental health professionals to assist us and our clients. During these times, mental health professional services are even more needed and valuable. Thank you for taking the time to be with us today. I'll be calling each of you in alphabetical order using the registration list as of about noon today. There are approximately 22 mental health professionals here, so each of you will have 3 minutes to talk. Alex from the Beverly Hills Bar will be muting and unmuting the participants during the program. Please share whatever you want to say about your practice, the services you provide, what you believe most distinguishes you and your practice, your specialty and favorite areas, tips for handling the pandemic, and effects of the unrest and quarantine, or whatever else you'd like to share with us today. If anyone registered today or was missed, let me know at the end so that you can have a chance to talk. The panel materials include the questionnaires received through Tuesday morning. We'll be sending out an updated PDF with all the questionnaires we received later this week, including the ones that are in the packet today. First, let's hear about her services from one of our speakers, Susan Rempel.
Let's see, I'm very excited to tell you that my office was in Beverly Hills, but until there's a vaccine, I am going virtual. So I guess I'm practicing all over the state, which is a really interesting concept. I do custody evaluations, I do parenting plan coordination. My therapy practice is almost exclusively filled with high conflict families, resist refusal, domestic violence. I don't really like garden variety cases, to tell you the truth. I also do mediation and work as a consultant in family law cases.
Okay, thank you. Marianne Aronson. Is Marianne here? Okay, I guess not. All right, is Terry Asanovich here?
Actually, she's here. I'm promoting her to
Oh,
panelist.
okay. Okay, thank you.
I am here.
Okay, great.
Okay, great. So I am in private practice as a marriage and family therapist in South Pasadena since about 1989. And I know a lot of you. It's nice to see these faces. I would say that my biggest specialty is co-parenting. I have a co-parenting course that I developed in 2001, and I've been teaching that one privately for a number of years, usually to 2 co-parents and sometimes 1. I also will go on from there to do co-parenting therapy or child custody mediation. And I love collaborative divorce work. And I should mention one more thing, and that is that based on Bill Doherty's discernment counseling, I do what we call at Pasadena Collaborative Divorce decision counseling. And this is for couples on the fence about whether they want to stay together or they need to separate. And that's been very useful work because lots of times people come in for couples work and they're really not in therapy. And that way I can also steer people toward more peaceful kinds of separations and divorces and teach them co-parenting if that's where they want to go. That's all for today. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Is Jennifer Burton Flyer here?
Hold on a second.
And again, are we able to see the people? Because I couldn't see Mary.
Actually, you announced Terry Asanovich. Do you want to proceed with him before that?
Yes, with her. Yes, Terry Asanovich.
He's been joining us.
See.
Hello, Terry. Can you unmute yourself, please? And if you want to, you can turn on your camera if you like to.
How's that?
That's great.
Yeah.
We still can't see you. You have your camera.
Okay. No, I have a camera, but it's not working. I don't know why.
Oh, okay. Okay.
All right. So yes, hi everyone. I'm in, my practice is now located in Encino, and I do child custody evaluations as well as consulting work, and also a lot of the visitation reluctance cases. I work on that. I also serve as an expert in various cases regarding the issue of child custody. I also do co-parenting and child custody mediation, and the mediation for me that I would get involved with would be just on the specifics of the child custody, not any of the property issues of any kind. I also have participated in as a child custody expert for a case for Department 2, where the case law came from that in 2011. It's Mauricio R. versus LC, and my evaluation and findings and testimony were upheld by the California Appellate Court. And I also am on the counseling and therapy list and the evaluator list for LA Superior Court since 2002 to present. I'm a past chairman of the Board of Behavioral Sciences. And most recently, I was going to be a panel presenter at the American Bar Association in April in San Diego, but unfortunately because of the pandemic, it got canceled. And what we were going to be speaking about is vicarious trauma and secondary trauma to attorneys and how to prevent that, because a lot of court staff, as well as attorneys and their staff, are getting traumatized and not even realizing it by hearing all this information about battery and terrible bad things that are happening, as well as issues with the pandemic. Because if you have, and because they're anticipating about a 25% spike in cases right now, and of divorces after the pandemic dynamics change a bit. And that is going to, what some of the personnel of the attorneys that they're going to be hearing about is going to be very traumatizing. Because I know already from my practice, I've been dealing with some first responders, as well as people who are losing family members as a result of this pandemic. And I mean, I can only imagine how that's going to affect the attorneys. And we get into consulting with vicarious trauma and also secondary trauma to help the attorneys not get involved with that kind of process. So that's pretty much it.
Okay, thank you. All right, is Jennifer Burton Flyer here? Oh, wait, okay. Is that no?
Hold on a second.
Okay.
Could you please repeat the last name, Jennifer?
Yes, okay, I gave you that list also. We're just going down the list. The last name is it's Burton Flyer. Number 8 on my list.
Okay. Let's see. No, I don't see her in the attendees list.
Okay.
I think she's registered as Jennifer Burton.
Okay, Jennifer Burton. Is Jennifer Burton here? Probably not.
No, I don't see her.
Okay. All right, is Misha Ellis here? I guess I should have checked.
The first name starts with M.
Yes, you're number 11 on the list.
No, I don't see her either.
Okay. Okay, number Rochelle Getz.
Yeah.
Is she here?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, she's joining us.
Okay.
And Misha Ellis is here.
Oh, Misha Ellis is here? Okay, I should be looking at the participants list. Okay.
Hi, thank you so much for letting me join. I'm actually an associate marriage and family therapist right now in training. And I'm here to sort of help gather some information and also look at people I would potentially like to collaborate with in the future.
Okay, great, thank you. All right, it's Misha Ellis is here. Can we put
Yeah. Hold on a second.
Okay.
She's joining us.
There you go.
That's not Misha.
Misha.
Hi.
Hey, hi.
Hi. My name is Misha Ellis. I am a licensed clinical psychologist here in California and in Georgia and in Tennessee. And my private practice is located in Torrance, California. And I conduct custody evaluations as well as therapy for individuals, families, and couples. I conduct therapy for individuals and families involved in legal proceedings, as well as co-parenting therapy. I also do a lot of psychoeducational and developmental evaluations, as well as clinical evaluations. And I'm on the panel for juvenile delinquency, the juvenile delinquency panel for the Los Angeles Superior Court. And I also engage in consultations and really appreciate this opportunity to introduce myself to you. Thank you.
Oh, thank you very much. Thank you. Okay, let's see. Rick Gottfried. Is Rick here?
Let's see. Is there any other way he can spell his name?
It's it's between 17 and 18 if you have the list. It's Gottfried, Rick.
I think he's not here.
All right. All right. These people, they're all in the panel materials as well, or the program materials. Okay. How about Amy Goldman? Is Amy here?
Yeah, she's here, and I'm promoting her to panelist.
Okay, great.
She's
Great.
joining us.
Okay. Can we see Amy? No?
Amy, please unmute yourself, and if you wish, you can turn on your camera as well.
Hello, how are you?
Oh, hi. Nice to meet you.
Thank you for having me. Nice to meet you too. I was there last year in person, and it's great I think some of you were there last year. I remember seeing you, Susan. I think you presented. And I don't know how long we have to talk about ourselves, but I am a licensed—
3 minutes.
3 minutes? Okay. I am a licensed clinical social worker in private practice in Santa Monica with children, families, and teenagers. And I also have significant experience testifying in court and working with high conflict child custody divorce battles. And I work on many reunification cases. And what information can what's helpful to focus on it? Well, I have a background working in the 90s at the Department of Children and Family Services. I worked at the Superior Court as a mediator, writing the physical and legal custody stipulations for highly acrimonious litigating parents. And my office is in Santa Monica at 270 26th Street. I actually just relaunched my website, which is my full name, amygoldman.com. And I added a lot more content. I particularly, I updated it because I'm doing a lot of telemedicine now, and I feel that having a presence on the internet is even more important than ever. Prior to this, I did not do telemedicine, so it's a big shift. And of course, when the pandemic rates, when the rates of corona are more, it's a more stable atmosphere, I'm happy to return to my office and see clients at that time. But I specialize, I work with also anxiety, depression, trauma. Obviously trauma and grief are a huge component right now of working with children and families, added already to the frequent challenges of high conflict divorce. Because my office is in Santa Monica and many of the families that I work with are located there, I'm not sure how much of you have seen the extent of the damage. It was a particularly horrific war zone after the last week. Santa Monica was one of the worst looted areas in the city. And the families that I'm working with there, the kids are mentioning the constant sirens and the presence of just seeing National Guard and the fires and the smoke and the search helicopters. So, and that coming at them just with the backdrop of having dealt with Corona and COVID is quite traumatic.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
Thank you.
I see Rochelle Goetz. Do you want to switch to her?
Okay. Sure. Sure.
Okay, she's joining us.
Okay. Great.
So this is my second go around, but I'm an associate marriage and family therapist. So thank you for letting me join and listen to your wonderful insight.
Thank you. Okay. Is Lisa Eisenberg here?
I think she is. Hold on.
And if you look at the program materials, you'll see all of these, all of their questionnaires completed, and we'll be providing a new packet, as I said, with people that have given us new materials. Lisa.
Okay, hi everyone. Nice to meet you. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Okay. So I'm a licensed clinical social worker, and a bunch of my information actually didn't go through. There was some kind of a glitch with the thing, so you'll see more of my stuff in the second round of.
In the second round, we're going to put it in. Thank you.
Thank you. But so my specialty is in divorce mediation, and I strongly prefer a team approach where the legal and mental health professionals are working together in the same room with clients. So, you know, things like collaborative divorce or co-mediation. I've worked on divorce cases with attorneys and financial specialists where, you know, my role is to help manage the difficult emotions that come up, work through communication, roadblocks, things like that. So if you have a case where one or both spouses are really like emotionally reactive, or maybe even the opposite, so shut down that it's challenging to communicate and reach decisions, I can kind of be there in the room to assist. And this would be for both mediation or litigation clients. I would, again, just work alongside you within the client meeting to help ease tensions and facilitate more productive conversations. I've received a lot of feedback from attorneys who say that having a therapist in the room, or in this case on the screen for now, with them helps ease the attorney's frustrations with the clients, and the clients feel more supported and comfortable in getting their needs met. Also, a huge advantage to having someone like me present is the ability to caucus when necessary. Seen some really great results when I've been able to spend time separately with a client who needs that extra individual attention. So I would kind of be like an add-on to your process for maybe just one session or multiple sessions, or even from the very beginning of the case, if you have a sense that it's going to be really beneficial to have someone like me participate from the start. So that's all I can think of for now. Please feel free to reach out with any questions or further discussion of how I can be helpful and we could work together. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much.
And
All right.
next, I think we have David
David
Kuroda.
Kuroda, yeah. Is David here?
Yeah,
Hi, David.
He's here.
David's here. Okay. Hi, David.
David, yeah.
Oh,
Hello.
you got to unmute him. Okay.
There he is.
Hi, David.
Good to see all of you.
Good to see you.
I've been told that I have a face for radio, so this is, I'm not so sure about this. First thing I want to say is that rumors of my retirement have been greatly exaggerated.
Really?
I did withdraw from the Family Law Executive Committee, as well as the practice groups called A Better Divorce and the West Side Collaborative Group. But I am practicing, and I'm focusing my work on direct practice with families and children. First, I want to direct my comments to attorneys and judges. Alex, I like what you said about when you find out that parents really are not the suitable parent in a custody case, rather than be an advocate for that parent, you withdraw, you resign as that person's attorney. And I commend you for that, because I've heard other attorneys say, David, you know, my responsibility is not to the children, but to the parent. So I really commend you on how you handle that. I was asked once by a practice group on the West Side, Patsy Ostroy, to come and talk to her practice group. And she said, the question I want you to address, David, is, why are you getting divorced? When I was at the courthouse, one of the mediators told me, well, David, I never asked that because it would take too long. Get into all the backstories about why the divorce is occurring. But when I talked to the practice group, one of the lawyers actually said, David, I never asked that because it's none of my business. But my encouragement to lawyers would be to always ask, why are you getting divorced? The reason for that is you find out about affairs, you find out about violence, you find out abuse of children. And I think you get a very quick key to some of the dynamics in that case. Joe Spirito and I wrote an article that Deborah published in her reference material.
Family Law Symposium material. Right.
Yeah, it's
like Alexandra's. Yeah.
yes. And maybe some of the rest of you will write articles also. And the title of the article was Help for Judges Keeping People Out of Court. And it was a article about consensual dispute resolution, which included mediation and collaborative divorce. I think I prefer trying to help people stay out of divorce. It matters when cases are seen in mediation. An attorney once with Trope and Trope called me, actually her client called me and said, I need to see you for mediation because my attorney said I should come and see you. As it turns out, I met with her and the father in the case, and we settled the case. This was on the eve of trial, and she was asked to give an additional replenishment of the retainer of $20,000. And then she said, well, David, why didn't my attorney refer us to you earlier? And I said, that's something you'll have to ask the attorney. But in another example, I spoke at a White Zuckerman study group, and I talked about the importance of mediation and settling cases early. And one of the attorneys in the back of the room raised her hand and said, David, I settle 90% of my cases. And I turned to her and I said, called her by name. I said, you know, that's really good, but it matters also when you settle the cases.
Yeah, really.
And I think the more we can do to keep parents out of court by resolving cases by agreement, I think that serves the whole family and children well. The other thing that I really
I think we have our time is up. David, thank you so much. I think we have our 3-minute time period is up, so we just gotta wrap it up. If you can wrap it up in the next 10, 15 seconds.
One of the questions I always ask children is, what if you had 3 wishes? What would you wish for? The first wish almost always is that my mom and dad weren't getting divorced. The second wish is that they would stop fighting. The third wish usually is, I'd like a puppy. So those are my tips for attorneys and judges. Thank you.
Thank you, David. So good to see you. Thank you.
Next on the list, I see Alice LaViolette, but
I don't think Alice can make it. She said
yeah, I don't think she's here. And next is Renee Leff, and she'll be joining us, or he'll be joining us.
Thank you.
And Renee, can you please unmute yourself?
How's that? Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
That's good.
Yes, we can.
Okay.
So
So
we can't see you though.
I don't know how to get myself on video.
It's you can push the button start video. It's next to mute and unmute. There's a button start video.
Okay. There I am.
Hey, fantastic. Great.
So first I want to say hi to my friends, Alex, I haven't seen you in a long time, and to David Kuroda, I want to say I'm so glad you're not retiring, and it's so nice to see everybody, even the people I can't see. So hi, and thank you to the panelists, because I just really loved and felt very informed after hearing from the Honorable Judge and Alex and Susan. So thank you for the information. I'm Renee Leff. I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist. I'm also a graduate of Southwestern Law School. I don't practice law, but I can tell you that having a law degree has come in very handy with my practice of psychotherapy, because I almost always exclusively deal with the psychological aspect of legal cases. but I've trained at the University of Massachusetts and have been certificated in infant parent mental health, ages 0 to 5 years old. I've been qualified as an expert witness in family law, and I'm currently and have been for many years on the panel for LA Superior Court to deal with high conflict custody cases. So I hope you are all doing okay in this crazy, kind of scary world that we're living in now. I closed my 3 offices in Brentwood, in Encino, and in Westlake Village when the stay-at-home orders were issued, and I'm going to reopen them soon. But for now, I've been Zooming, telephone conferencing, FaceTiming, and I'm starting to feel like I'm on house arrest. I'm thinking creatively about my work. And so one of the things I've done is to create a 6-session counseling program for divorcing parents who cannot or will not co-parent. It goes beyond parallel parenting in that it shows how couples can parent with minimum contact between them and still produce a safe and a peaceful transition for their children. I've also designed, and so I was interested to hear Rochelle Gertz speak earlier. I've designed an online class for interns, for new therapists, and also for therapists who are experienced but are not familiar with the role of mental health professionals in the legal arena. This class deals with the ethical and legal dilemmas that often coexist in psych legal cases. Susan spoke about that, and it's really an informative class, a fun class, and a really important class. Finally, I'm expanding my role as a consultant so that therapists and attorneys, because I have worked with attorneys examining child custody evaluations and kind of strategizing and how best to use their mental health professionals, discuss their cases with an experienced mental health professional so that new therapists and experienced therapists, as well as attorneys, can expand their understanding of the connections between law and mental health. So that's who I am. And I just want to thank all of you again and say how nice it is. Even the people I couldn't see, like Marianne Harrison, it was nice to hear her voice. Thank you for putting this together, Deborah and Ellen.
Thank you. Thank you.
And
All
I
right,
guess the next one is Carol.
Yes, Carol Lieberman. Is Carol here?
She is. She's joining
Okay.
us.
Great.
Oh. Oh, you're my coach.
Okay. Carol, if you could please unmute yourself.
There we go. But it's funny that you can't see me. I'm
Now,
not.
what about her? Yeah.
You can push the button start video, which is next to mute.
Oh, I see it. I see it. Okay.
Okay, great.
There we go.
Oh, great.
All right. Hi, everybody. I am happy to join you. I am a board-certified forensic psychiatrist and expert witness. I have been doing this work for over 20 years. Hundreds of cases, civil cases, criminal cases, lots of family cases, custody cases, divorce cases, nationwide. I mean, just this past 6 months or so, or past year, I've been doing testifying in custody cases in Florida, in New Orleans, all over the place. So it is particularly useful for you to have a psychiatrist when there are mental questions of mental illness in the parents or the child. For example, I've had cases where there's been autism or other developmental disabilities, certainly typical psychiatric problems like bipolar or schizophrenia or any kind of psychiatric disorder that you might think about. Also, if there are medical problems in a parent or child, having a psychiatrist who has an MD obviously is very useful.
Right.
I particularly specialize in high-profile cases and high-conflict cases. High-profile cases because I'm very experienced in handling media attention to cases. When it is a high-profile divorce or custody cases, you have to have somebody who knows how to handle the media, not to reveal too much, anything confidential and so on. Although I treat children and adults and families, when it comes to cases, custody or divorce cases, I prefer to work as an expert witness and testify. I do testing. I know it was mentioned, some psychiatrists do have experience in training and testing, and I do that as well. I do consulting to attorneys. I do forensic examinations for child abuse, videotaped and anatomically correct dolls and all of that. I have written a number of books that are relevant, 2 relationship books. One is called Bad Boys, Why We Love Them, How to Live with Them and When to Leave Them, and Bad Girls, Why Men Love Them and How Good Girls Can Learn Their Secrets. So those talk about profiles of these kinds of people who are heartbreakers, and it's a good way to understand the different personalities. I also have written the foreword to a book called Divorcing the Narcissist, and I am a parenting expert. I wrote a book called Lions and Tigers and Terrorists, Oh My, How to Protect Your Child in a Time of Terror. So, and during the coronavirus and the crazy riots, I have been doing pretty much since the beginning of the coronavirus pandemic, I have been doing every day nonstop media interviews, helping people cope with the quarantine and the virus itself and parenting. I've been giving lots of parenting advice on how to talk to your kids about coronavirus, how to talk to your kids about racism now, all of that. So I like variety. I like challenge. As I said, I've been doing this for over 20 years, so I enjoy things that are that are a little more challenging than the average kind of case. Although certainly I love helping the children who are caught in these crosshairs, even in garden variety cases.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. Is Jeff Lulo here?
Yep.
Okay. Hello. Good to see
Jeffrey,
you.
can you please unmute yourself? We cannot hear you.
Okay. You have to unmute yourself.
There's a button mute and unmute. You can click on it.
Okay, how about that?
Okay,
That's good.
Good.
That sounds
I'm
better.
Jeff Lulo. I'm licensed as a psychologist with a practice in Encino. I've been practicing psychology for about as long as Alexandra's been practicing law, about 47 years. And I've been involved in custody matters since about 1980 or so. In addition to doing custody evaluations, consultations with attorneys, 733s, and that kind of thing, my practice also involves neuropsychology, where I do evaluations primarily for legal matters and personal injury lawsuits. I teach at UCLA, where I supervise in the Medical Psychology Assessment Clinic. And at one point, I did do child and family therapy for about 15 years and set up the child and family therapy division of a large medical group that at the time was in competition with Kaiser. But then it got bought out by Cigna. One thing I noted when Alexandra was talking about helping the help of a mental health professional, I thought of the parents who come in and have diagnosed the other parent. And they come in and no longer are there bitches and assholes in the world. There are borderline personalities and narcissists. And I have found that the accuracy of these diagnoses is probably about the same as the accuracy of the parents who come into their attorneys and tell them which cases they should cite and which code sections should be applied. A little knowledge is a dangerous thing. And the internet gives you about as little knowledge as you can use, and it can be dangerous. As a psychologist, I do psychological testing. I do it myself. I don't send it out. I do everything, the home visits and all that. There is no staff. There's me. I am the essence of a solo practitioner. I do the scheduling. I do all that kind of stuff. When I was talking to my wife the other day about, gee, what should I say for this thing? Has any special skills I might have? And she said, well, you're very good at parallel parking. So I want to mention that. And I think I've talked about enough as I want to about myself. I'd rather listen to other people. And I've enjoyed listening to the panel. And I've enjoyed meeting some of the other mental health professionals whom I don't know. And I'm glad that David is not retired. And I'm not retired either. I'm still around. Thank you all very much.
Thank you. Okay, is Joseph McKenzie here?
He's here. He's joining us.
Great.
Joseph, it seems that your video is off and your microphone is not connected. Joseph, there's a button mute and unmute, and also start video, which you can try to push. It looks like Joseph has some technical issues.
Okay, well, we'll move on, and if he can get back on, let us know. Okay, Jennifer Mathis, I'm not sure if she's here. Oh, sorry. Kathy Memel.
Yeah, she's here.
Kathy Memel. Okay, great. Okay, great.
Kathy, can you unmute yourself, please?
Yes, did I do that?
Yep.
Yes, you did.
Okay, hello everyone, and thank you for all the valuable information you've been sharing tonight. My name is Kathy Memel. I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist. I've been in private practice since 1984, and my office is located in Beverly Hills. After college, I was trained to be a family law paralegal and worked for a litigator for 5 years, and I saw the destruction of what happens, and that's what led me over to mediation. So I'm also a former conciliation court family mediator, and I really enjoyed my time there. It was invaluable. So I now do child custody mediations and help parents create workable parenting plans. I'm a former psychology teacher at Beverly Hills High School. I did that for about a year, and I enjoy working with divorcing couples and individuals so they can move from trauma, grief, and loss to start to begin to create a new life. And I do co-parenting therapy and education. And one of the tools that I use is in my office, I have a great big tablet, and I draw the person's family tree, and I go back 3 generations. And I want to know about everybody in the family. And what we look at is the patterns of behavior that get passed on down through the generations. And we look at this from a position of understanding, not blame or criticism. So the more insight somebody gets, the more opportunity they have to shift some behavior. So I find that invaluable. I had a couple that he came in and was furious. He wasn't going to give her any custody. She had an affair. That was it. When we went to his grandparents, his mother had an affair, and the father took away the child and never saw his mother again. His mother had an affair,
and the father took the child and never saw the children again. And I had 1 hour with them. And then when I got to him, I looked at him and I said, what was that like to never see your mother again?
That's
He burst into tears and said, I won't do that to my son. I won't do that. So that's what I find so valuable. And I love when people get insight and can say, okay, I can now do something a little bit different. And they have a chance, their behaviors, their children are going to copy every single thing they do. So when they start to see that, sometimes the lights go on, sometimes it's off for a while, but I find it helpful. And in terms of lawyers and therapists, I always say they're like the CIA and the FBI. When they share information, they get further. So thank you for having me join you tonight. It was really a pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
And it seems that Joseph will join us from Renee's computer. So let's try it.
Okay. That's clever. Okay.
Please unmute.
Joseph, can you unmute yourself, please? There's a button, unmute, mute and unmute.
Mute. Okay.
Mute.
There.
How's that?
Okay, good.
Hi. First of all, I'm working on my parallel parking. I love the comment. I'm a licensed clinical social worker and an attorney. I first appeared in the juvenile dependency courts in 1972, so that'll date me a little bit. I have worked in the mental health courts. My principal practice has been as trial counsel in the juvenile courts. I've represented thousands of parents, thousands of children as well. And your work as mental health professionals is crucial. I go after mental health professionals because I find out some of them aren't licensed. Some of them, the licenses aren't current. Very basic stuff. Some of them are working outside of their area of expertise and so forth. So it's so important that you're having this program, that you are experienced yourselves, that you keep current with your training and so forth. I really appreciate this program. I was there, I think, last year in person. My buddy Ernestine Fields was there. Maybe some of you know her. I've worked with her for many years. God bless you all. Thank you for the opportunity to participate this evening. And I want to find out how I can get my MCLE certificate. Thank you.
This will be emailed to you within a week.
Okay, that's good.
And next, I guess, is Susan Ralston.
Right. Did we already do Lee Miller? I'm sorry.
I'll give this back to you.
Okay.
What's that? Can you repeat?
No, I just give it back to you. You're picking up the screen.
Why am I
Instead of
back
me on
on?
the screen.
No, not okay. Hi, Renee. Okay, Susan Ralston around? Okay.
Hi there.
Hi.
You here?
Yeah.
Let's see. How about that? Hi. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Probably it's better if you hold it horizontally.
Horizontally better? Now? Nice to see all of you. Thank you for having me. It's good to hear all the stories. I'm a clinical psychologist in Pasadena, where I've been since about 1986 doing custody evaluations and counseling with young children using family systems orientation, like Susan. My background from the 1980s was as program directors for psychiatric children units within psychiatric hospitalization. So I was a program director. So I worked with kids from ages 3 to 12 for a lot of years, and that remains to be my specialty. I taught group therapy for families, for parents, and for individual and child using social skill training programs. Currently, I still work with special needs or any kind of child issues for the very young child, move away cases, alienation cases. I do my own testing. I usually don't do home visits unless somebody is telling me there's a reason to do so, but I can do that as well. I've done a lot of interesting cases during this pandemic here with using Skype And I'm wondering if that's going to change the way people are doing some of these evaluations and counseling. It seems to be convenient, and the kids seem very user-friendly with some of the apparatus. So I'm not quite sure if that's going to be a move to the future and how we're going to revamp some of our stuff. But thank you for taking the time. Appreciate talking to all of you.
Okay, thank you.
Next one is Nancy.
Nancy Sattenberg.
Yep, she'll join us shortly.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we
We
can.
hear you. We can't
Okay,
see
Do you
you.
want to turn on the camera?
I'm going to turn it on.
Okay.
There you go. Okay, great.
Great.
I'm Nancy Sattenberg, and I have been working with high conflict divorcing or divorced families for about 35 years. My journey has been a combination of hard work and good luck. I'm a licensed clinical social worker and a marriage and licensed marriage and family therapist. My first internship that I had when I was in social work school was with the Conciliation Court. I'm so thrilled to see David Kuroda and to hear that you're not retiring, David. That's great. Although I knew that, I think, from talking to you. But anyhow, so I worked with the Conciliation Court, and I loved it. It was so lucky for me to be there. I enjoyed helping people stay out of court by making their own decisions and custody plans for their children. When I graduated from social work school, I got a job. I got hired as a Conciliation Court senior family mediator. I worked downtown in Van Nuys and in San Fernando. I continued to enjoy what I was doing, and I was there for 5 years when I decided to go back to school again and get a Ph.D. Hugh McIsaac was great. He worked with me. I worked 4 10-hour days and then had a 1 day a week that I could take classes. He let me switch them around and work any days that I wanted to work so I could go back to school, which was incredible. And I loved that, and I then got my PhD. I worked for the court for almost 25 years, and then I retired and went into private practice, which is in Sherman Oaks. I am still working with high conflict families, but my role has expanded beyond mediation to many of the other mental health services that need to be provided for this divorce, for the divorce process. I am collaboratively trained, and I work at being a mental health coach in the collaborative process. I have anything, I'm willing to see clients and have anything that has to do, except for evaluations, with high conflict divorce families.
Okay, thank you. Is Robin Sachs? Oh.
Actually, it seems that Renee Lehr joined us.
Okay, that's great.
Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Yes.
We can hear you. We can't see you yet.
All right. Well, hello, everyone. I see so many familiar faces there.
Would you like to switch on your camera if you like?
Oh, yeah. How do I do that?
Just click the button Start Video. It's next to microphone. Yep.
I got it. Okay.
Okay, great.
Hi.
Hi. We went to school together, actually. That's so weird.
That's right. We graduated from Southwestern, the same.
Don't mention the years.
No. Oh, it was not that long ago.
It was like 1999. Okay.
Well, my name's Renee Lehr, and I am both a licensed psychologist and a licensed attorney. I was an attorney first, and my private practice is in Santa Monica, and for, well, a long time.
Much older than I am.
More than 25 years. I've been in practice as a psychologist. Like Nancy, I started out in mediation as a mediator and evaluator with Family Court Services quite a long time ago. I was hired by Hugh McIsaac, knew him very well. And David Kuroda, knew him very well, as he was my supervisor for a period of time there. And hi, David, it was nice to see you. I'm glad you're not retired. So I am, I am a mediator and an evaluator. A good part of my practice is doing parenting plan coordination, and I also do some family therapy. I would say the biggest part of my practice involves custody evaluation and co-parenting, counseling, targeted co-parenting, working with individual couples or parents on co-parenting issues. And so many of the comments made tonight really resonated with experiences that I've had over the years. One of the things and I'm not sure who said it first, I think it's come up a couple of times, but using a kind of team approach, using an evaluator as part of your team, whether you're litigating or mediating or working collaboratively, using a mental health professional as part of your team really can improve outcomes for your client, and definitely can improve outcomes for the child in the family and for the whole family. I mean, the entire family transition is improved. There's so many ways that you can use a mental health professional to help the parent that's your client. But one of the ways, I'll just mention one of the ways, and this is something that Alexandra, that you mentioned, and that's using a mental health professional during evaluations, as a consultant during evaluations. That can be really a kind of ethical minefield, but there are ethical ways of conducting those consultations that really do help the parent and really do serve the best interest of the child, because among the many things that you're going to be doing as a consultant during an evaluation, you're going to be helping that parent to improve. And parents, I have found, are really very ripe for listening to any advice you can give them, anything that you can do to help them. They feel like the consultant is really on their side, and so they're willing to really listen. And
we're running out of time. If you could just give us a second just to wrap it up.
Just quickly, what the psychologist or other mental health professional is going to do is going to identify that parent's problems in parenting and co-parenting, and they're going to map out very clear strategies for their improvement. And that's going to help the child, that's going to help your client, and in the long run, it's going to help the whole family.
Okay, thank you.
And next one is Robin.
Robin Sachs?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Okay. Is Robin here?
I'm here.
Okay.
Hi, everyone. My name is Robin Sachs. I'm going to try to keep this quick in the interest of time. I, like Renee and actually some other people, am also a lawyer and a therapist. And unlike Renee and unlike some of the people who are lawyers and therapists, I'm actually very much a practicing lawyer. However, I don't practice litigation in the family law sense. I'm a 20-year former prosecutor who specializes in child sexual assault, child abuse, stalking, all kinds of harassment cases. And so I am the person really at the intersection of family, crime, dependency, and I'm a mental health provider. I actually have a private practice, but I also still work for the county. I conduct forensic interviews for LAPD for their Family Justice Center. I did the forensic interviewing for Stewart House and the Violence Intervention Program for many years. I've been an expert in child sexual assault cases. As a matter of fact, Stan Katz and I just gave a speech at the AFCC on the forensic interviewing of children. So if there is a case that has these multi-layered approaches, I usually get called into those. I don't provide actual therapy in the private sector. I actually provide therapy for DMH on the community side, but I don't do it privately. My specialty in my private practice is coaching, parenting plan coordination, and I have a website called dearcoparent.com, where I work behind the scenes to really help people with communication and writing, and I do coaching by modeling through teaching parents how to communicate. So I help them respond to their co-parent in writing and be able to help coach about child development and so forth in that way. Also, just as a side to mental health providers, as a lawyer, I help link a lot of people to licensure issues, or when they're having problems with the BBS and have some things along there. I've gotten involved in a lot of Yelp cases where therapists have been called out and can't respond on Yelp. So I'm kind of a very odd unicorn, a jack of a lot of different trades. So I'm a bizarre animal among this group, but I'm honored to be here.
Okay, thank you. Is Rhea here? Rhea Sutton?
I think she's not. So next one is probably
Kim Sheeran.
Mm-hmm.
Is Kim Sheeran here?
Yes.
Okay.
Let's do start video. Hi. How are you all? Thank you so much for having me tonight. I am new to the Beverly Hills Bar Association. I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist. I've sort of come full circle. I went through my own high conflict divorce, and Your Honor, was lovely to be the judge on my case. So it's great to be here tonight. I just found it funny. Wanted to share that. But I'm a group private practice owner in Sherman Oaks. I specialize in narcissistic abuse recovery, high conflict divorce, and mindful parenting. I do mostly individual therapy, and I'm a founding member of the Narcissistic Abuse Awareness Alliance, and it's lovely to be here. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you. Okay, we have Tiffany Towers is our next person. Is Tiffany here?
Let's see. There she is here.
Here's Tiffany. Okay.
Hello. Hey. One of the benefits of having a name at the end of the alphabet is I get to hear all this lovely discussion, but one of the downsides is that means that I get short on time at the end. But there's plenty of information of what I do in the packet that was handed out. I just wanted to share, I have an office in Beverly Hills, a private practice. I'm a licensed clinical psychologist. I see individuals, couples, families. One of the things that I noticed in the conversation tonight was about how, and it revolves around my work with couples, whether they have children or not, is that sometimes couples who come to a decision that they need to end their relationship, it can be done in a healthy way. And if they have children, they need to prioritize ending things in a healthy way because their relationships with their children are going to continue. And so what I like to do in working with parents who are separating and finding a new normal of how to relate is I try to get them to understand how their past experiences in childhood and through their adult life have influenced how they parent and how their handling of this transition is going to impact their children moving forward. And that could be positively or negatively. So what do they want to model for their kids, and how do they want to impact them for their adult life and their future relationships? I also do a lot of consultation and mediation support for attorneys, and I have experience in adding the aspect of addiction and recovery, as well as health psychology issues. So whether it's acute health issues or chronic health issues, I have a lot of experience helping families deal with how to incorporate and cope with that, as well as how to manage the grief and loss. And that's unfortunately becoming very prescient now with COVID-19. I am working virtually during this time. Normally my office is in Beverly Hills, as I said. Another thing that I wanted to point out in how I think about my work, our work as mental health professionals and as attorneys, is that we happen to see people for just a short span of their life journey. And it's usually at a very psychologically vulnerable and emotionally fraught time. And we can be there to support them in very positive ways, or we can model for them ways of how to resolve conflict and move forward in a collaborative way. But I do want to address the fact that one of the things that I specialize in is supporting mental health professionals and attorneys and their staff in how to cope with the stress and potential burnout of the work that we do, because it can be very trying at times to balance work and personal life, and how to be our best selves professionally as we continue in doing the work that we feel so passionately about doing. So thank you for having me along this group discussion.
All right, thank you. Are there any other mental health professionals that we didn't call on that are here tonight?
I don't think so.
Okay, okay.
And,
All right, I want to thank everyone very much for attending and participating today. I hope you all stay safe and healthy. Hope to see you all in person next year. And Ellen, would you like to give any closing remarks as well?
I just want to say thank you to everybody who participated, and again, an extra thank you to Alex for managing.
Right.
Thank you all.
Thank you to everyone.
There's a quick question in chat, which was like in the beginning of chat. I can read it. What if from Sarah? What if the evaluator has a rule that a party in a 7:30 evaluation cannot have had the assistance of a consultant mental health professional?
You want me to answer that?
Sure.
Too bad.
Say that.
You knew I would say that, right?
Okay, I guess that's it then. All right, thank you all very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Take care. Have a good evening.
Thank you, everyone's great.
Stay safe.